So, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Starting Over podcast. I'm so pleased to have you. It's been some time that I actually have been observing your world, the almost 30 world from afar, and it's great to meet with you and to hear a little bit about your story today. So, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Shannon. Yeah, I'm really excited. Very, very, I'm kind of getting back into the groove of having conversations on podcasts after having a baby. So I'm really excited to chat because I feel like a new person.
Yes. Well, on that note, I wanted to talk about this idea of letting go of old identities and stepping into a new one because it is such a fallacy in life that we are stuck and stagnant in one specific space in time. Nothing is permanent. Everything is moving. And I think when we manage to move through these different stages with as much flow and grace as possible, is when we invite so much more joy and ease into our lives, even though it is easier said than done.
Yes.
And I know for you, one of the big changes has been stepping out of or away from a big hustle period, right? Like going to your story a little, you describe yourself as always being a hustler, working many different jobs that you never knew would prepare you for the big thing that you have created with your co-founder, Krista Williams, in the Almost 30 brand. Your podcast has had 20 million downloads. You sell online programs. You speak in public. And now you're a mother. And it's called a lot of things into question, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Lately, I've been reflecting on just kind of the trajectory prior to almost 30, in my 20s, where I think a lot of us in our 20s so badly want to latch onto some sort of identity because our 20s are such an uncertain time. And they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be a really uncertain time, but it doesn't make it easier. It makes it really challenging for a lot of people to navigate their relationships, their purpose, their career. Um, and so I just remember so desperately wanting to latch onto something. And I latched on to wanting to become a famous actress in my 20s. And that's what I had studied in college and really had always wanted to be, but I really doubled down on it, as you should. But I think what started to happen was that my soul was kind of pulling me elsewhere, though everything that I had learned for acting is now applicable to what I do now. But when the podcast came into my awareness, Krista came to me one day. I was like, "You want to start a podcast? Like, I feel like we've been having these conversations about this transition that we're in. And I just feel like it's relatable and a lot of people would feel supported if we talked about it." And I'm always down to do creative things. And so I said, yeah, sure. At the same time, it was kind of pulling me away from my acting pursuit. I had difficulty with that for a little while, feeling like, wow, like, am I just giving up, and not realizing that like this natural transition supported by all the training I had done already was really meant for me. And I could lean in and not be afraid that I was letting anything go. And so, fast forward to today, I'm feeling similarly where, motherhood, as you know, is just all encompassing. Like, I just feel it's all my brain wants to think about. It's all my physical body is doing is like nurturing, feeding, and like comforting my child. Um, and I'm really passionate about it. I feel like this is a huge part of my purpose here on earth. And at the same time, I have a career over here with almost 30, which has been so fulfilling and so magical and just taught me so much personally and professionally. And I also just feel the rumblings of change again. And I'm like, man, this this is a lot, but what I know from past experience is that I'm allowed to lean into the new that's right in front of me. And it's really beautiful. Krista and I have an incredible relationship where we're in talks about this all the time. And she too is experiencing rumblings of change. And not that almost 30 is going to disappear, but we're just thinking about what does the future of almost 30 look like, you know? Um, so all that to say, it has been so important for me to not resist the change that is. I've likened it to kind of like softening into the change and then see how it transforms me, because anytime that I've resisted it in the past, I've just been so unhappy and it doesn't feel natural to resist the change. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Hmm. I think there's something for everyone in really focusing your energy on rewriting a new story rather than clinging on to the old. Because so many of us, we have self-sabotaging tendencies where we really do cling on to what is familiar, what is known, and naturally the process of change, it can bring about, sure, excitement too, but also oftentimes a lot of fear.
Yes.
And I think when we overly stay rooted in the fearful aspect, we're not allowing ourselves to transition. We're not allowing ourselves to see the next step, the next path into something that is the next expansion of yourself. And it is so, so important.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful like alchemical process that happens, and part of that alchemical process is like a death. And so it can literally feel like you're dying. Parts of you are dying, and that can feel wrong. And that can feel like something you want to stop or, you know, just put a band-aid on, but it's actually a part of the entire process.
Hmm. So I know that a big part of what you have done, both personally and professionally, is focused on this healing journey as such, gaining greater awareness of who you are, why the way you are, and how you can step into your full potential. And I'm curious to hear what really the starting over was for you in 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 stepping into this journey of self-discovery, of self-growth.
Yeah, it's been just that. It's been a journey. Um I think, for me it started in during my Saturn return. And so Krista and I, just to give people background, we started the podcast during our Saturn return, which is a time when the planet Saturn returns to the place that it was when you were born. And what it's doing is basically really pushing you to look at the ways in which you've been living your life that are no longer aligned, and then align them. Um, it can be really challenging in general. Usually it's marked by like a big event in your life, whether it's a move or a divorce, or maybe you get married, or maybe you have a child, or maybe you get fired from your job and you start a whole new path. Um, for me, it was a move across the country to LA from New York. And I think LA for me at the time it felt like this just deep breath for me. I had been living in New York, just really surviving, to be honest. I was working many bartending jobs and trying to pay my bills and trying to audition during the day. And it was just, the city was like eating me alive because I let it. And so when I got to LA, I felt like I could breathe. And slowly but surely, I felt more connected to my body, not only because I was able to be like outside more, I just felt like more in my body. The weather's beautiful there, there's so much nature. But I was also being introduced to different modalities, whether through the podcast or through my career out there as a soul cycle instructor, whether it's breath work or meditation, um, somatic therapy. And I just really understood the value and importance of being connected to my body. And then slowly but surely, I realized like my body is home to my soul. And I realized the connection there. And I got to know my soul. through practices like soul journaling and meditation. And I just, it was a slow, steady process of returning back to myself through spiritual and more health centric modalities. And I was just, I was so glad to be with her again. I feel like I hadn't really connected to myself deeply in honestly like decades. Teens are kind of funky, late teens, early 20s is
For
weird
everyone.
and drunk, and so to return back, I was like, oh my gosh, like I had a newfound love for myself. And at the same time, I was also in a season of being single. I was in a long-term relationship prior, and then just before my Saturn return, I broke up with the person that I thought that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And that was about 7 years of being single. My husband laughs now because he's like, "Were you really single for 7 years?" I'm like, "Yes, but I was dating, like nothing serious." So, the fact that I got to come back to myself without also being distracted by the dating scene and trying to find the one was the biggest gift of my life. At the time, it was a little hard, especially in the beginning, but I realized that this season of my life had a purpose.
Mm. It's something we haven't really spoken about on the podcast very much, about this stage of being single and allowing that, being with that, because I think so many of us, we seek to couple up quickly,
Yeah.
often
Yeah.
due to the discomfort of doing things alone. And that's going to depend on somebody's specific background, of course, their attachments and patterns and everything. But there is something really beautiful in allowing yourself to be single and explore who you are on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the biggest gift, honestly, of my life. It set me up to be in the relationship that I am in now. And I still have practices that I would do when I was single that I have retained in my marriage that are really important for just, I think, remaining true to myself even within a relationship, because it can be easy for me to kind of like sway a little bit when I'm so deeply connected to someone. But yes, I created a
What do you mean
program.
by that?
Say
Sway
it.
a little bit.
Hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I am certainly an empath, and so I feel, and I'm also a recovering codependent. So I feel very deeply when other people feel, and sometimes that causes me to abandon how I'm feeling individually to be what the other person needs, to mirror them, or to like overfunction and support them. And what I've learned, especially in my marriage, is that, we are two individuals um, that have come together, that remain two individuals, but that we have, this commitment to our union. And in doing so, we allow one another to be who we are without feeling responsible for what the other person is experiencing unless we directly caused it. So, um, sometimes I would sway. I would kind of be like, oh, did I do something wrong? Oh, is he mad at me? Knowing full well that I did nothing wrong, that he wasn't mad at me, that he's probably just in a mood after work, and I can just let him be in his mood. And I don't have to let it affect me. So I've gotten much better at not swaying. It's something I always have to like kind of look at a little bit, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners have done this too because you care. You pick up on what other people are feeling. We're all incredibly sensitive. Some of us numb it out more than others, but it's hard not to pick up on other people's energy and then leave how we're feeling in order to like kind of co-regulate in an unhealthy way.
Hmm. There's something I love in what you just said about the ability to stand together as two separate individuals, because oftentimes we either enmesh, we absorb into one another,
Mhm.
or conversely, we have a lack of connection because we're
Yes.
living two individualistic lives.
Mhm.
We're living in parallel. So I think there's something, yeah, so the key I think to a really good relationship is to master that balance point of being together, to be committed, to be united, but to stand alone and separate as two strong individuals. Quick pause. If you're a regular listener to the show and you have found value in these episodes, I would be immensely grateful if you pledged your support. Reality is, podcasting is not a free venture. There are many behind the scenes costs. But with your support, you'll be able to help me fuel the growth of this podcast and keep bringing you bigger and better guests each and every week. And of course, the signature honesty and real talk, which I'm known for. So if you'd like to say thanks and support the show for less than a cup of coffee per week, you can click the link called Patreon in the show notes. Thanks so much in advance, guys. Back to the episode.
Completely agree. And just on this note, I recently read and have been practicing the 80 marriage. And basically, this is, without going too far into it, it's an approach where you're in a relationship where their wins are your wins. There's no tit for tat, there's no competition, there's no power dynamics. It is really a relationship in which you're asking yourself, how can I support the other person? Like, genuinely, how can I support them? Because their wins are your wins, and vice versa. I think a lot of times when, you add layers of, you know, m- my husband getting a new job or we're having a baby, like just these layers of life that are, very common for people to experience, the waters can get really muddy in a relationship, and you can forget that you are two individuals, as we've discussed, but that you want to provide support to the other. You don't want to, you know, kind of take from them what you need in terms of like, I need more alone time. So I need to spend time alone. You have to watch the baby. It's like the other person has it within their heart, both of you, to say, like, how can I support you? And then you do it for each other. So it feels really balanced, but you're going above and beyond, both of you, for the other.
Yeah, agreed. I'm curious for you, because this comes up as a question I've heard many a time about whether you need to be the person that you want to be before you get in a relationship, going back to what we said about being single and embracing being single and the self-discovery that comes with that, knowing then of course what you want. The question is, in your opinion or in your experience, did you find that you needed to embrace this period of being single, work on yourself, which then led you to choose a different partner and to your now husband, or an alternative?
Yeah. I get this question a lot from people in my Sacredness of Being Single program. They're always like, okay, I got to heal myself before I find the person. And that was me for a while. I really thought that I had to fix so many aspects of myself in order to be loved by whoever my person was going to be. But I've actually realized that one of the deepest points of connection in my now relationship with my husband, and was so when we first started dating, was the aspects of me that were imperfect, that were a little like, oof, I don't want to look at that. When I would allow those aspects to be fully seen by him, I just saw him love me more. And sometimes he would say it. He's like, I love you more now that I've seen that aspect of you. And I think there's an intimacy in seeing parts of someone that no one else gets to see. And two, I think there is just a deep love and respect that you can have for another person when they allow those parts of themselves to be witnessed. And also when they recognize that it's a part that they really do want to work on. Like, there's nothing sexier to me than when my husband is like, I got to work on that. And I'm like, Oh my God, tell me more. Like, I love that. And same, like, I really, in our relationship, it's so important to us that we own what we're bringing to the table. And I think this
Yes.
is very important for every relationship. Own what you are bringing to the table and say it out loud,
Good and bad.
good and bad. Just be like, you
Yes.
know what? I've been so impatient this week. Like, I just want to call that out. Like, I think I am tired. I think I am also being affected by just the uncertainty of the future right now. I don't know what's next. And I feel like I've been really impatient with you. And I just wanted to call that out and say, I'm sorry. I mean, just the trust, the intimacy, the respect, the connection that you build in those moments will blow your mind. So if you are someone who's dating and you're like, I should just heal these parts of myself because, oof, God forbid a partner sees this, let that go. You have to let it go. You will always be tending to parts of yourself. It just is. As a human being, it's just the nature of things and it's okay and it's perfectly normal. But when you can, in relationship, be seen for all of who you are, that is when you can form a real deep, authentic connection. If they're just connecting with the parts of you that are awesome, there's going to be a rude awakening at some point because those parts, other parts will come out and they're going to be like, who is this person? Rather than showing and being open with all parts of you so that they can be like, ah, yeah, that's my girl. It's all
Yeah.
good. She's working on it, you know?
Yeah. I feel that. I hear that a lot. And I think there is something that is naturally healing in relationships because we are drawn to people who actually, whether perspective here, but that actually trigger us or trigger the parts of us that we need to heal.
Yes.
That will repeatedly happen
Hmm.
in any relationship. In fact, one could even say that is the purpose of a relationship because it's inviting you to heal and to grow.
Yes. I could not agree more. Oftentimes, what we did not receive from our parents oftentimes will be then repeated or mirrored in our relationships. But it's in this context, in this adult relationship, that we are able to uh, get from the experience what we actually need. And so, if initially in my relationship with Sean, um, he would be avoidant when I would get really emotional. And that was mirrored to me, with my dad when I was younger. He felt very uncomfortable when I would cry. And so to experience that again was very triggering. But as an adult, I can say, you know what, babe? My emotions, like sometimes I don't even know what to say or how to just explain what I'm feeling. I just need to feel. And I think all I need from you is really to just like hug me. That feels good. Like I don't need you to solve anything for me. It's not your fault unless I'll tell you if it is,
Yeah.
but I just need you to hug me. And he's gotten so amazing with just like, what do you need right now? Do you just need me to like hug you or can we talk about it? Like, what do you need? And that has healed that younger part of me that was like ashamed for having big emotions. So, yes, you will attract people who will kind of trigger those very um, core things about you that need
Wounds, even.
tending. Yeah, wounds. Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And if we and adopt a positive perspective on that, you could see that as being beautiful,
The
you know,
most beautiful. It's
beautiful
incredible.
when you manage to step through it, grow through it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I want to go a bit to your professional work. And something that you said earlier was you didn't realize that at the time that all of these previous roles that you had led you to this moment. And I want to break that down because I think for so many people, we don't often in periods of transition especially, we don't recognize that so much of what we have is transferable and so much of us is gearing us up to this moment because we even though
Hmm.
we can't see it yet, it only makes sense when you look back and you put the pieces together. How was this for you? this stage of stepping into this work and really going gung-ho to build something much more significant um, than what you had previously done, probably in terms of responsibility, in terms of demands of your time, of your energy, self-belief.
Yeah. Yeah, it was everything makes sense now. So I'll just say that. But when I was starting out as an adult, quote unquote, 18, going to college, I was like, I want to study theater. I will also be an English major because I feel like that gives me some legitimacy too. But I really wanted to be an actress, whether on Broadway or in TV and film. And that was clear to me. Like I really held that in my heart. I felt like I was talented and um yeah, it was a passion of mine. I moved to New York and quickly adopted this idea that I was a starving artist and I needed to have like a million jobs and try to make auditions work during the day. So I bartended and was like a bottle girl at various venues in New York City. And I'm sharing this because at the time I was I remember being really pissed that I had to work all of these jobs because they made me so tired. They really drained me. It was a lot of physical work. It was also emotionally draining. Who you're meeting late night at these places. Um, you're not seeing the best of people. Let's just say that. And so it was pretty emotionally draining for someone who's really sensitive. And so I was very resentful for all of these side gigs that I felt like I had to do. But what I didn't realize was that those odd jobs that I was doing, whether it was bartending, whether it was fit modeling, eventually I became a soul cycle instructor, all of these adjacent jobs to what I wanted to pursue as, my passion, which was acting, um, really prepared me for what I do now. So late nights when I was bartending, I mean, I would basically interview people. They'd be sitting at the bar and I would ask them really interesting questions, maybe to pass the time, maybe to get to know them, or all of the above. Like it was just a skill that I had developed and I really got into the habit of asking like very beautiful questions to get to like the core of who people were, because it's boring for me to ask like very surface questions every night and so that really prepared me. I also learned, a business sense, I would say, when I was working in that industry. I watched a lot of whether it's bar owners, managers, like how they ran their business, not always how I would run the business, but I learned a lot from both what I respected and what I didn't respect about them in terms of owning a business and running a team. And now I run a business with Krista and we run a team and manage a team. And um, so that was super valuable. When I went off to Soul Cycle, I learned how to speak on a microphone. I was on a microphone all the time. I learned how to lead a room, lead a community, garner a community. I learned how to um, really create like a creative flow in my classes, which translated to like creating a creative flow in an episode of a podcast. So many of these skills I use now as a podcaster. And none of it was like classes, degrees, etc., which I think are all very valuable. But I wish I would have known back then that the things that I didn't really want to be doing because it was outside of my acting pursuit were actually preparing me for what I do now. And so when the podcast came along, as I said earlier, I was kind of like, do I want to go all in on this? Because, acting is really the thing I want to do. But I was really pulled. Like I kind of, my soul led me. She was like, let's do this. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And now it all makes sense because I had been prepared for this. Not that we were the best podcasters out the gate. We definitely, we have grown over the years, but I definitely had the foundation.
Yes. No, I love the focus on what is transferable. And I think it's such an important reminder for people because we do live in a society that overemphasizes the importance of papers and credentials and certificates. It is what is inculcated into us as children. I look back and I
Yes.
think, a couple of my degrees, I do not use anything
I know, isn't it
anything
sad?
from
I know.
that.
I
And it
know.
cost a lot of money at the
A
same
lot.
time. A lot of money. And I think, so I really want to like nail in that point of experience is everything. This is like the
Everything.
school of life,
Yes.
not necessarily the university and the fancy credentials. But
Yes.
what I do want to ask is how, and this is for anyone who's thinking of transitioning in their work, maybe starting a new business or starting a business for the first time, how important was it or how integral was it to your success to be 100% in, to be fully committed? Like, I will
Mm.
make this work. I will close the doors, the open loops, and I'm
Mhm.
going to fully jump in. Was
Yeah,
that your
it's
experience?
it's an interesting question. I'm genuinely thinking about this because so this is not a tangent, but in human design, I'm a manifesting generator. And so one of the aspects of that design is one, I have to be very passionate about something in order to remain focused and committed to it. It has to light me up, or else I'm not going to do a good job at all. Um, and I think that part of me will always have other things that I am doing outside of the main thing. And I think because it's really important for me to have various, things that are lighting me up. It just gives me a lot of energy. It actually fuels me to give to the main thing. So I'll say that. So it wasn't like a one lane focus for me. I was pursuing acting for a while on the side as we were building the podcast. I was teaching Soul Cycle, which was so demanding on the side as we were building the podcast. And I do think that there is value in doing that because when you are building something from the ground up, if you put so much pressure on it to become successful, financially lucrative, to fulfill you in all the ways, you will most likely be disappointed. And so Krista and I coach podcasters a lot specifically, but this really applies to anyone who's wants to go on something. In the beginning, you want to make sure that yes, most of your time, energy, and focus is going into the thing. However, if we put all the pressure on it to support us in like living our life out the gate, that's too much pressure to put on a baby. It's just a baby. We have to let it grow and mature and also show us what it is. We come in with an idea of what it is, but maybe it's supposed to be something else or, a little bit different than what we thought. So, do I think you have to be 100% in your heart? Yes. But literally in your day-to-day proportion of what you put into it, not out the gate. Eventually that will happen. Eventually you can make that transition, whether you quit your job, your day job or what have you. But I want for me, and I know this now, so in anything new I create in the future, I want to have time with an idea to let it percolate for as long as it needs to without me putting pressure on it to become a thing because I'm afraid of, fill in the blank. So, all that to say, yes, I was 100% in. I was very passionate about this. And I also, Krista and I did not quit our day jobs for like 2.5 years, but we were spending every moment outside of our jobs, pouring into almost 30 doing events, recording in our closets, in spaces that we didn't rent and they kicked us out, like just doing whatever we could to get this recorded. So that's my advice, and it might be a little controversial because I feel like people think they have to be all in, but I do think there's a period where you can just let the idea tell you more about it,
Mm.
before you put the pressure on it.
I think it's a fine balance because, and this is really in part knowing what your tendencies are. Because if you know that you are somebody who procrastinates quite heavily, gets caught in inaction or in fear and patterns of overthinking, that could be a risk because then instead of moving into action, you're
Yes.
allowing yourself to dwell in planning, in research, in preparation, in staying above the actual work.
Yes.
So
Agree with that.
that is a risk. But then on the other side, it's what I hear certainly in your example is saying, okay, I was fully in on this new chapter in the sense of, okay, it felt right. I was excited by it. I was passionate about it, and I did give it the energy that it deserved. Because to start working in the evenings around a job, that takes dedication, that takes passion, because it's
Yeah.
so much easier to sit back on the sofa and watch Netflix,
Mm,
um, instead of actually taking the steps necessary to make that change in your life.
yes. Yes. No, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point. You have to know yourself, and it wasn't that we weren't taking action in those early days, but it was taking action without feeling like, oh my God, this has to work. Like this action has to work or else, we can't pay rent this month or this. Like we just didn't put the pressure on it. So it's like acting without putting too much pressure in the beginning.
That probably saves the level of insanity.
Yes,
No, the
exactly.
burnout, of course, the burnout, the stress,
Yes.
the pressure, because it is frightening, and I think it's what prevents a lot of people from making these transitions because it's not always easy,
Not easy.
even if it's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
How
Amen.
important was community support and people around you in this process?
Everything. Um, Almost 30 is a brand built around a collective experience. And so when the community started to form, we were tapping in with them all the time. How are you guys feeling? What's on your heart lately? What questions do you have? What are you going through? And that would influence our content. That would influence what we talked about on the podcast, or what we talked about at our events with them. And so, and they have been, so many of them have been with us since the beginning. So they've grown with us. They've grown through their Saturn return and are now in their 30s. We definitely have new people coming in who are in, their 20s, but so many are OG listeners of the show. So I'm so thankful. Krista and I say this all the time to each other, and publicly. It's like they've seen us, have seen us at our highest and lowest, through the podcast. And we've also connected with them through their highest and lowest, whether, we have intimate talks in person, whether they are in our programs, Sacredness of Being Single, or in our membership. They are always down to go deep, and they have trusted us to hold space for that. And it's
Mm,
just been one of the greatest gifts to us during this whole process. And also, I think in terms of support as you build something, I'll just speak to that really quickly because it could be a really lonely experience to start something new. Um, Thankfully, I have Krista, so it's never felt truly lonely. But there are highs and lows, and not everyone very rarely do people understand the highs and lows you go through as an entrepreneur or as someone who's creating something new. Um, and so to have, whether it is friends very specific friends who either have started their own business that we can kind of connect with on a deep level about like the emotional experience, the mental experience, the spiritual experience of this, whether it's coaches, mentors. We've called on all of them, our therapists. It's just really important to have a bit of a village that you can lean on during this intense building time. And then you all get to like enjoy the fruits of your labor together, which is also really fulfilling.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think something that has come up a question from some of our community here is on how challenging it is to build these authentic friendships. Even more so, I find, than partners. This is what comes up because I think it's when we do partner with somebody, we often end up spending a lot of our time with them.
Mhm.
Whereas now with our friends, with the work responsibilities, sometimes family responsibilities, it is so hard to find the time to pour into those relationships so that they do have the level of depth and trust and enjoyment
Yeah.
that comes when you spend enough time with somebody.
Yes. Yeah. Friendships is a huge theme in our community as well. And I think women, in their experience as an adult, it's hard to make new friends. It's hard to keep relationships in integrity and at the depth that we truly desire. So that has been really challenging for me. I'll be very honest. I feel like Krista is in an era of her life where she has really mastered deep, intimate friendships. And it's really beautiful to see. I think our friendship, Krista and my friendship, is always a model for me in terms of, how I want my friendships to be. And that is the ability to be myself, no matter what mood I'm in, I can show up to our relationship and know that I don't need to manage her experience of me. I also know that we'll always be honest with each other. We often have clearing conversations in our relationship. We have the added layer of being business partners as well as best friends. And so oftentimes we need to clear the distortions in the field between us. We need to clear, what I said last week, how that came off, how it made her feel, or, I've been feeling something under the surface. I just want to like speak to this, like tell me more about how you've been feeling. We do it often. We've gotten really good at it. And now it happens very quickly. So it's not this like big lead up, dreading having the conversation. Um, we will just on that note, we will always again take responsibility for what we're bringing to the table. We'll never point fingers. It's always I statements, I've been feeling this way, and in my experience, this is what I heard and this is how I felt. I would love to know more about like what you meant. Um, and that really gives the other person an opportunity to share their own I statements and experience. So that is something that, I always recommend to people who might be in friendships that you're like, there's something funky happening. We've been friends forever and now there's like some weird energy. And I always recommend like, let's have a clearing conversation. Just kind of put all the truth out on the table, clear anything that's like really distorted over time and see where you stand. It might be time to take a break. It might be time to end the friendship. It might be time to like recommit as friends. Um, and I also think that, you know, to your point, there's a lot of things vying for our attention, our partners, our children, our careers. And so it seems like with friendships, we just assume that people are going to like be there and it's going to be okay. And not to say that like I can't pick up with my high school best friend and feel like no time has passed at all, even though we haven't talked in 2 months. That happens for sure. But I do think that with our busy lives, we can get really smart about how we connect with our friends. I have a standing every 2 weeks, I have a standing phone date with my best friend from high school who I don't talk to that often. But I was like, you know what? I want to talk to you more so that every time we do talk, it's not this like Okay, tell me everything about your life.
Yeah, that's happened in the last 2 years.
Like, no, I kind of want to be more in the fold, in the mix with you. And so we have a standing phone date. It's in our calendars. It's not sexy to put in our calendars, but it is what it is. And that's how we make that work. Um, I've also had to learn that I'm someone who is like so deeply like just in my family season right now where I'm like, I just want to be with my family. Um, and I really had to learn and push myself to spend time with friends and in that experience of spending time with them, realize the value of how important it is to have friendships. Especially in this season of motherhood, friendships with other women, other mothers, etc. So sometimes you got to push yourself. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, but once you feel what it feels like to be connected deeply and authentically to someone, you'll crave that more and you will get used to these kind of crunchy moments before it happens. Um, and just know that it's totally, totally worth it.
Yeah. And I'm also what springs to mind there is one of the top 5 regrets of the dying that Bronnie Ware writes about is that I wish I had have kept in touch with my friends.
Yeah.
And I read that recently, and that's why I wanted to have a special note on that in this podcast, because I know friendship is so important for you. The fact that you're building a community or you've built a community is a reflection of that. And I think it is so incredibly important for us to make sure we carve out the time to really connect on a
Yes.
genuine level, which, yeah, I don't see happening all the time. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's, I don't want to say it's hard. It's just, we have to recalibrate our priorities. Like, on a regular basis. We can get so mixed up and like not mixed up, but so involved in what is right in front of us. My child, my husband, my life, my work. And that could take a lot of energy. And I can honestly feel like I don't have any more to give. Like going
Mm,
out with a few friends feels like a lot of effort, even though I would love to see them. And so I really had to just get honest with myself about like, how is this going to feel like afterwards? Are you going to just like be so lit up and filled up? Yes. So let's get over the
imagine that
fact.
now.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
Get over the fact that you're a little tired. It's all good. You'll get energy from them. So I've just had to like, you know, speak to that part of my brain that's like, I don't know if we have time or energy. It's like, oh, no, no, no. How much time and energy is it really going to give you to be with your friends? And that's really helped me. But I love that quote that you shared. Yeah, it's so true. And I think just to add to that stat, it's like or that fact, it's also a statistic that, people in the world who live the longest, number one commonality is their relationships and being in
Yes.
community. And so I think about that a lot. Um, in terms of like my overall health. It's not just the food I eat, it's not just the exercise I do. It's like, what is the health of my relationships?
Mm, such a good point. Lindsay, I'm going to go into the final fast few questions now. And the first thing I wanted to ask is, what is something that you used to believe that you no longer believe? Really coming back to this idea of evolving and transitions and moving through new chapters in
Yeah.
life.
I used to believe that I had to sacrifice my joy to be or obtain success. And what I mean by that is I was convinced that I had to struggle, 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 sacrifice, 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 and then I would get the thing finally. And then I would be the winner. I don't know. Like, I just had this weird, distorted understanding of how I was to become successful. I think it was programming from my childhood and just watching other professionals. And I think for me, what I've realized is that when I follow my joy, the more success I have, period. Always. And oftentimes, the less efforting, and what I mean by efforting is pushing when it doesn't feel natural, the less of that I do, the more attuned and aware of opportunities that I am, thus more successful I am. So that surprised me. Um, and I'm so happy to be in that place now because to struggle for so long and like sacrifice my happiness and joy with what I was doing was honestly keeping me where I was, keeping me so very stuck.
Hmm. How was the stuckness, or what was the period of stuckness?
I was in a period of stuck. I've been in many periods of stuckness, but um, in my 20s, when I was pursuing acting, I was just in this stuckness of, please choose me, please choose me, please. I'm working hard. Choose me for any role of any kind. And I was in this loop of waiting to be chosen. And I think what is to me a little bit sad about that is that in waiting to be chosen, I forgot why I was worthy of the role or worthy of doing what I loved. I was convinced that because I wasn't chosen, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't talented, that I didn't stand out. And that was a lie. Just that whole industry it's a bit funky. It's a bit funky for many reasons that we won't go into, but I didn't I let it tell me a lot about me when it didn't know me. So, yeah, that period of stuckness, honestly, I was kind of jarred out of it by the podcast, by being in a creative state, by really taking it into my own hands with Krista and creating something rather than waiting to be chosen.
Such a good point. I think I think sometimes the antidote to stuckness is action. It is
Mhm.
movement. And no matter how small that movement is, it can be the tiniest little step forward, but
Yes.
that is what is going to get you out of that stagnation.
Mhm.
And you won't be able to create, to be innovative, to follow what makes you feel alive and joyful until you learn how to calm. And
Yes.
I say that with compassion because I've been there so much, so many times myself, of in a place of bringing the tense stress that makes you hyper focus on something without seeing the field of possibility.
Yes.
So I really hear what you're saying there in terms of being calmer, which opens your eyes to possibilities, to opportunities.
Mm. Beautifully said. Yes, exactly.
Next, what is a quote or an affirmation that really resonates with you that you'd like to share?
Mm. This is summarizing a quote. My husband does a twice weekly newsletter where he curates a bunch of quotes. And so I read this the other week, but there are some seasons that are you are living a question, and there are some seasons where you are living the answer. And it just reminded me that in any season where I'm living the question, I think the human part of me is like, where's the answer? Like the uncertainty is so uncomfortable. And I just love the reminder of like sometimes like being in a lengthy season of living the question is a beautiful abyss to be in, where you're truly just you're open and available. The field of possibility is there where you're not needing to know. You are truly trusting in the unknown. And then there are some seasons which I feel like I've been in more recently with like my marriage and having a baby where I'm like, I'm living the answer to so many of my prayers that
Mm,
just gives me so much peace and confidence the next time I'm in a season of living the question.
beautiful. I've never heard that idea before. Love it.
Comforting.
Yeah. And the unknown, I mean, that is something that we all grapple with
Yes.
in learning how to be with that discomfort. And it's yeah, it's a challenge to say the least.
Of course. Of
Currently there,
course.
currently there.
Yes.
But lastly, Lindsay, what is a kind of final message that you want to give to anyone here who is on a journey of self-development, of healing, of growth, of self-discovery?
I spent a lot of time comparing myself on my path, a lot of time looking at other people who were doing the healing work and the self development work and, bettering themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and feeling or convincing myself that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't as powerful as they were. I wasn't as healthy as they, whatever my mind wanted to convince me of. And that really robbed me of what I know now. And I wish I just would have held that in my heart back then, which is, you know, I was on a very specific path led by my soul. And the people that I was watching and comparing myself to, so were they. But in this world of self development and spirituality, there is no hierarchy. There is no better than doing it better. It really doesn't exist when it comes down to it. It is what you are called to do, called to heal, called to look at, called to uh, nurture, fine tune. And that's perfect. And I think the more that we can just embrace who we are and where we are, I mean, the world's going to be such a better place, and our experience on earth is going to be a better one. Um, so yeah, it's simple. It's just, tend to that inner part of you that compares and know that your path is so perfect and so divinely designed. And only years down the line will you realize, how perfect it was. But if you can just plant the seed now, like where I am is perfect, even though it's uncomfortable, I know there is a purpose here. I think hearing that more often when I was a bit younger would have just given me a lot of
Helps. Yeah.
peace.
Yeah. It certainly invites in some fresh air, a bit of a
Yeah,
breath, a bit of ease. Yeah. And that depends on some. I mean, maybe some people listening aren't so into the spirituality. I know that I've always teetered.
yeah,
Sometimes I've
totally.
found I've gone into it, and then sometimes like, no, like this
Mm,
language isn't making sense to me, or it feels like an excuse to justify,
sure.
um, to stay in action. There's a few different things, but I do often find that when I embrace that, uh, I certainly feel more peace and more ease.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
yeah. Lindsay, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. This has been so fun. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Mm.